Hello and welcome to World Talks on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. This week, Paris hosts a major conference of 30 world leaders with President Zelenskyy to finalize security guarantees for Ukraine, even as doubts remain about US support under Donald Trump. Meanwhile, Polish President Karol Nawrocki's first official visit abroad to Washington brought promises of a continued American troop presence in Poland and even an invitation to next year's G20 summit in Miami. What do these developments mean for Poland, Ukraine and Europe? Well, to explore these questions, we're joined by Jarosław Ćwiek-Karpowicz, to discuss this. Jarosław, thank you very much for taking the time. Good to have you in the studio.
Thank you for the invitation.
A pleasure. All right, so I want to actually start with some quotes by President Macron of France, held during this summit, which are really quite powerful. The first is that he says 26 countries have committed to taking part in a reassurance force in Ukraine, be it land, sea or air. That's a pretty strong... first of all, 26 countries. Second of all, it's not just boots on the ground, it's planes in the air and ships on the sea. Tell me what the implications are of this statement by President Macron.
First point, it exactly fits to Ukrainians' needs, because Ukrainians now, they need a clear air. This is the most difficult situation for them now, to be under the constant pressure of air attacks from Russia. And second, they want to have a clear access, sea access, to export their goods, to have, let's say, contact with the rest of the world. So this is exactly what Ukraine needs now. The front line is quite stable, so I think that, of course, during the war, everything is possible, but Ukrainians, they do not feel the constant pressure from the land, that the Russians are coming and the huge invasion is under preparation. So this is exactly, this statement shows us that it was created with full cooperation with Ukrainians, and it's very good. About 26 states, it shows also the second point, European unity, not only European Union, but also countries like UK, Norway, other countries who are outside the European Union, who really would like to be engaged in security guarantees for Ukraine.
Okay, so in practical terms, does that mean that there'll be, for example, a no-fly zone? Does that mean there'll be some kind of barrier which prevents Russian warships getting close to Ukraine? What do you think it means?
It would be the perfect scenario. But of course, we don't know how Russia would react, because from many years we see how Russians are engaged in some political conversation. They agree and then they completely ignore what they said. So, of course, Europeans would like to support Ukrainian army to defend its country. And this is the first point. But of course, when the ceasefire would be negotiated, then Europeans may create such an option that we are prepared also to be involved more with our air capabilities. And of course, in this regard, Europeans nowadays are not able to do this alone. We need US military presence and equipments. So far, Donald Trump is on the one hand engaged in political conversation with Putin and Zelenskyy, but on the other hand is quite good in conversation with Europeans and also in supporting Ukraine.
I want to come to President Trump in just a minute, but before we get there, you mentioned ceasefire. Now, Putin has made it very, very clear that he would see any representation of NATO troops or NATO countries in Ukraine as a direct attack by NATO. So why should he agree to a ceasefire? Because he doesn't want to have troops on the ground from NATO countries.
It's true that nowadays we see not a clear signals that Russians are prepared for some negotiation, at least about ceasefire. What is now in our hands is more sanctions, and this is the second part of the Macron today's statements, that Europeans are preparing together with Americans and next sanctions, and this is something what may hurt Russian interest. Also, Donald Trump, who was asked quite recently about his engagement in helping Ukrainians, when some U.S. journalists asked him and complained and said that U.S. is doing nothing, he mentioned, come on, we introduced the secondary sanctions against India, who is the main Russian oil importer. So it means that in this regard, the sanctions regime and how to punish Russia and also countries who profit from Russian export, U.S. and European Union or European member states, countries are going hand in hand. It's a very important, and this shows us also that it's something different what we observe sometimes ago when Europeans, especially Germans or French, they were so much interested in having business with Russians. Now, the most important European countries and also business people who are in these countries and who influence governments, they want to stand together and ban Russian oil and gas industry.
Right. So the hope is that secondary sanctions are going to bring Russia to the peace table, and hopefully we'll get some concrete peace talks, which, as you say, haven't actually happened so far. Now, just staying with President Trump, he mentioned the secondary sanctions. He also told President Nawrocki during President Nawrocki's visit to the United States, to Washington, that U.S. troops are going to be staying in Europe. So does that give you heart? And what difference does that make to the European position? How far does it strengthen Europe's statements?
Such a statement is, of course, it was positively received in Poland, but also it should be positively received in all European capitals. There are about 70,000 U.S. troops on the European soil. Of course, it's maybe a few percent of all military presence of European army, but U.S. troops with very sophisticated equipment, they have also, let's say, it's a deterrence against Russian threat, also in terms of symbols that Russia may be afraid of attacking any European countries if there are European troops in these countries. So such a statement made by Trump is a very positive signal, especially in the context of internal, very important debate in United States. It's not a secret that U.S. Defense Department is under preparation of global posture review document, which probably would suggest a decrease of U.S. military presence in Europe in expense of increase in Asia-Pacific region, and such a statement make a problem, especially for U.S. politicians, because now State Department and Defense Department should follow Trump's statements, and if there's a clear signal that there is no intention to decrease U.S. troops, at least in Poland, it's a very positive signal for Europe, because such a, let's say, changing of number of troops between European countries is a problem for our whole security. The problem for us would be just to increase in Poland and in other countries, in Eastern flank, but also in Western Europe, where our U.S. Military presence very important and very sophisticated. For us, it's important to have all troops, or at least more. And this is what Trump said,
right,
that if Poland would like to do, we may even increase
the number of American troops in Poland. Now, Poland has made it very clear, or Prime Minister Tusk has made it very clear on more than one occasion, that there will be no Polish boots on the ground in the event of a ceasefire. So Poland is the outlier here in terms of the European position. What does that suggest for Poland's relationship with the coalition of the willing?
I would not say it's an outlier. I mean, Poland shares the longest border with Russia and Belarus, and our main obligation is to preserve the hub position for Ukrainians and keep safe NATO eastern border. Our situation is very similar to Finland. So that's why we should not expect from Finland and Poland that we will be the first countries who will deploy our troops as a security contingent to Ukraine. It's clear that it's better to engage soldiers from countries which do not share border with Belarus or Russia, like Germany, France, Spain, or other countries, and just keep our bases with US troops and protect eastern flank. This is our first argument, and I think that we gain a political consensus in Poland. And second, it's maybe symbolic that because of our very difficult historical Polish-Ukrainian relations, and also how Russians are using for their narrative and propaganda that Poles have some hidden agenda and would like to conquer Ukrainian territory, maybe it's not better not to send Polish troops to Ukraine, but rather prepare everything what is possible here and send Ukrainians what they need. I recently talked to Ukrainian deputy foreign minister. I hosted him in my institute, and he clearly told me that we do not expect, Ukraine does not expect from Poland Polish troops in this contingent. It is exactly important what we are doing now. We send equipment, we mobilize let's say, such action among other European countries, and we serve as a frontline country with our logistical assistance, and also in terms of hosting people, lots of Ukrainian migrants, families who are there. So we are not expected, at least from Ukrainians, that we will send our troops.
So many convincing reasons for Polish troops not to be in Ukraine. Now, in the last couple of minutes that we have left, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte said that clarity is coming soon. What do you think he means by clarity in this context?
Probably it's only my guessing that maybe he mentioned what exactly President Trump organized together with President Putin and Zelenskyy, and this, let's say, maybe a little bit naive statements that we are very close to achieve some agreement with Russians and we may stop this war. I think that unfortunately for us, Russia is extremely motivated to continue this war, and the clarity is that there is no way other than to support Ukrainians to stop Russian imperialistic steps towards our security.
Yeah.
Ukraine is the first country which physically response on Russian attack, and we, I mean, NATO member states, European countries, together with United States, should do everything what is possible to help Ukrainians to keep this state functional,
right,
and army operational.
And the clarity, it sounds as though it's going to be a combination of political, military and economic clarity in the European and US response.
Yeah.
Okay. Jarosław Ćwiek-Karpowicz, thank you very much indeed for sharing your analysis with our audience.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that brings us to the end of this episode of World Talks. Don't go away though, lots more coming up. Goodbye.